Wendy, can I please confirm that the meeting's been recorded and the live stream is now on? Thank you. I have pleasure in opening the council briefing of the 14th of November 2023 at 6 o'clock, and I welcome all those who are in attendance. The City of Vincent would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay our respects to elders past and present. Now, I have apologies from Councillor Castle. And I note that there are no councillors recorded as having leave of absence. Everybody else is here. And I will note that Councillor Greer is joining us via video link. Okay. So, members of the public, I'm now going to open it up and see if there's anyone who wishes to speak. If you have not been to a briefing at the City of Vincent before, we ask that you come forward and that you state your name and the suburb in which you reside, and please indicate which agenda item number you're speaking on. Now, we are timed to 3 minutes, and please indicate whether you wish to whether you wish to have your comments live streamed or not. Speakers are not visible on the live stream, only your voice will be heard. So if you don't wish that to occur, please advise. A summary of your remarks are going to be included in the minutes, and any responses, if they are required, will be in the agenda of the next council meeting. So if you are still speaking when your time is up, I will be asking you to wind up your remarks. Okay, so would the first speaker like to come forward? And if you could please indicate again.
I'll go.
Oh, so we had this gentleman behind us. So, yep, your name, your suburb, and the agenda item.
Okay, so my name is David D. Prospero. I own property in the corner of Lord Street and Edward Street, and in Edward Street. I've been coming to the councils on this matter whenever I could, since as far back, I think maybe when Nick Catania took it on. So this is for item 6.7.
6.6. Sorry.
5.7. Excuse me.
5.7.
The concrete batching plant's relocation. I guess I can only say that it's timely in the fact that the federal government is spruiking the idea of getting more affordable housing into play, and the West Australian government naturally needs that same more affordable housing into play. And we have two very large areas in that part of Perth, very large areas that would actually supply affordable housing to a large population. I just hope that the West Australian Planning Commission, or whoever makes this decision, to allow whoever it is, we know the batching plants, on the basis that they have a precedence, have a very strong thought about what they're doing here. They will be going against the grain of what's required. And what's more important that's required is another area of very, let's say, affordable housing close to the city that will do much more good for the area. I've always argued this as well. Than having these two concrete batching plants who think they're allowed or should be allowed to stay there over and above everybody else for any reason that only suits them. Not the elephant in the room, which is a great place to start up a new population. I've seen people living in that area back in the 60s, in the 70s. It was quite a lot of people living in that area. There was very small amounts of light or heavy industry, but the area has been deprived of a population, and I can't understand any government agreeing to actually let that happen, given the fact that these concrete batching plants can actually determine and make their product outside of the area. That's it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, would the next speaker like to come forward? Right, please state your name and the suburb you're from and the item you're
I'm an old
speaking
hand.
to. Sorry,
Old hand coming in. 20 years been coming in.
could you still state?
I
your
will.
name? Thanks.
My name is Judy Burrows, 70 Auckland Street, North Perth, talking to the agenda item 5.3 of 80 Auckland Street. You will have received my submission, and I would like to clarify that the information on properties consulted came from a sit-down meeting with John O'Cohen in the planning department when we marked these out on a map. We had 29 Gill, 31 Gill, 78 Auckland and 81 Auckland, with the applicant being 80 Auckland. Of those 5 properties consulted, 3 were owned by the applicant at that time, leaving 2 only, which obviously would never meet the 6 minimum to get this to you all to consider. Totally wrong. On a separate map, we marked out the properties that would be affected by the precedents of this particular development being approved. Again, 5 properties down, and the precedent for their setback should have been taken over the average of those 5 setback properties, which would have been 8 metres instead of the 2.9 that is currently being offered. I thought I'd add this because when talking to the previous Mayor, Emma Cole, she told us there was no precedent, but every conversation I had in the early days was full of this word from the planning department. So I'm confused and would like a written clarification as to where this stands. It is being used a great deal when comparing 80 Auckland and 31 Gill, and now incorrectly applying it to the western side of Auckland Street. I would ask that the Mayor and councillors work with the planners to come up with a respectful consultation process which allows at least 6 residents to actually return. From the planners, I have been told over and over, we have to help this current applicant get their dream home. I have never heard that the applicant needs to be responsible for the block they purchased and conform as much as possible to the built form and R codes. I have never heard we need to be considerate of the neighbours' hopes and dreams in purchasing their homes, or the dedicated work done in this area to preserve this garden sort of area. Everything is focused on giving the applicant what they want in the planner's recommendation. Vincent opposed the subdivision of this block, so the attitude to a large infill home instead of sticking to the modest single home deemed suitable confounds me. I hope to be able to discuss with you all in person if you do get to see you before the next meeting. And I would ask that at the next meeting that you make it a pure refusal based on what was asked from them in the June meeting, and they have not conformed or even tried to conform in any way. So please read all the submissions before next week when you make a decision, and particular that by Kat and Chris Haken, who have gone through itemising all the non-compliant and misinformation that is contained in this 110 page. We are hugely disappointed in the errors being allowed to go through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have the next speaker, please?
Hello, my name is Julian and I'll be speaking on behalf of 46B Joel Terrace, Agenda 5.1.
Can I just ask that your suburb is
East Perth.
East Perth?
Just to give a little bit of context behind the land and the streetscape surrounding. So it's a 213 square metre block. The land is currently split over 2 different levels, approximately 1,200 mils difference between front to back. There is prevailing views of the Swan River, Optus Stadium and the East Perth skyline. There is currently a vacant block to the north, a block to the south with a double-storey house, and a block to the east, which has a 5-storey apartment block approved by the City of Vincent. The surrounding streetscape comprises of different developments ranging from single, double and 3-storey houses with a variety of different styles. However, these different styles utilize the same materials, predominantly being face brick, render and cladding. So a little bit about the proposed development, just to give you a bit more context. So it's such a small block, and we had to use wisely and maximize the internal spaces to make sure that the design hadn't been compromised. We work with the topography of the land. As I've said, that there are 2 different levels. So the ground floor currently 0 course, and then drops down towards the rear, 1.2. We felt that working with the existing infrastructure was important, although it probably didn't favor the orientation of living areas. So we ensured that we utilized the existing retaining wall as the foundations for the garage, and also maintaining the street tree, as we felt that that's in line with the city's vision. Also, we have utilized materials that have been consistent throughout the streetscape. So the red brick work, the render and the cladding can be seen on our facade. And just lastly, to finish up, I'd like to thank the City of Vincent for working with us to get this to a place where we feel this contributes positively to the surrounding amenities. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have the next speaker, please?
Hello, my name is Trish Byrne. I'm from Perth, and I'm here to voice my support for the office's recommendation in item 5.7 related to the concrete batching plant's relocation plan. The damage of a further extension to the progress, investment in and development of the Claysbrook precinct cannot be underestimated. As we are all aware, the current uses are not compatible with the area, and otherwise our ex-use is not aligned to the objectives of TPS2 or the recently adopted framework. Ample time has been provided to both companies to genuinely progress with the relocation and to enable Claysbrook to capitalise on its very unique development potential. We sincerely hope the time and efforts of the Claysbrook community and the City and Council in preparing the framework, and more broadly over the past decade, have not gone to waste through the granting of a further extension. We fully support the City and the Council's effort, hopefully in endorsing the relocation of the 2 concrete batching plants. We would just like to know slightly more on the City's reference in part 4 to the shortest possible extension. If we could get more information on what that expectations would be, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you have the next speaker, please?
Good evening all. David Hunter, North Perth, speaking against agenda item 5.3. So I just want to say good evening to all of you, and firstly, congratulations to all those newly appointed in your respective roles. We wish you all the best for the future as you strive to make a difference in the City of Vincent. My wife and I, who's here this evening, obviously, will address you as the owners of 31 Gill Street. We speak in opposition to the amended plans for 80 Auckland Street, which is the property directly to our south. Hopefully everyone is aware of the extensive and complex history with this block and the series of events that has led everyone to this point. All the neighbours affected by this development have vehemently opposed the plans, resulting in the unanimous decision made by Council on the 20th of the 6th, deferring the application for the following reason: to allow the applicant to consider a greater graduation of the development as it transitions to the south. This is both distance from the street horizontally across the development, as well as greater articulation of the development and setbacks between the ground floor and the upper floor. This is not explicitly accurate and abridged in nature. A comprehensive viewing of the online recording on YouTube on the 20th will support that Dan Loden stated that he wanted to see a greater graduation of the development both horizontally and vertically as it transitions to the south. We are very disappointed to see that the applicant has disrespected the direction of Council and made minor amendments once again that do not address the reasons for deferral, and all adjoining neighbours find themselves back at square one. We are also extremely disappointed to see the inaccurate streetscape elevation find its way into the briefing paperwork without correction. All inaccuracies and the failure to address the reasons for deferral have been comprehensively listed and detailed via submitted statements from the adjoining neighbours. So I implore you to delve into the details, including our legal submission, before making your judgments on this development and ultimately adjudicating on this matter which is still seeking considerable discretionary approval in a multitude of areas. It should also be mentioned that the DRP still had issue with the bulk and scale of this amended plan. There are neighbours in attendance this evening who continue to show up to oppose this particular development. Tristan Marshall's here. Judith Burrows, my wife, Kat and Chris Haken. The neighbours to the south couldn't be here tonight, but obviously had a meticulous and very detailed statement opposing this. So hopefully you'll see that and appreciate the lengths that the neighbours have gone to have our say in this regard. It should be acknowledged that the community sentiment is not against development in this space, but is strongly opposed to this development. There are viable solutions to the development plan that could satisfy a whole range of issues, but I'd be quite confident to say that the applicant is not interested in conceding on any level for the betterment of moving forward. I encourage council to refuse this current application based on the recent history and the work that's been done. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Can we have the next speaker, please?
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm Fiona Hunter from 31 Gill Street, North Perth. The adjoining property again, Dave's my husband to the north. I would just like to follow on from what Dave has said. When purchasing 31 Gill Street to build our home, we did all of our due diligence. Knowing we could retain our city views was of utmost importance to us. Unfortunately, the previous owner, who also owned 80 Auckland at the time, was extremely underhanded and pushed plans through after accepting our offer. This is the DA approval from 2021 that you'll have in your agenda. This is also where the nightmare begins, and in the coming week, we will provide more information and clarity around this. We paid a premium for our land because of the city views. We have also gone to great expense of a glass wall in our upper floor living room to take in those views, because once again, I will say that we did our due diligence enough to know that what is being proposed in front of us at 80 Auckland Street today should not be happening for a many number of reasons, not to us or the other neighbours. Most of these you'll read in our submissions and the neighbours' submissions that have been sent in the last few days. I would also like to comment that I'm most aggrieved at the inaccuracies in the agenda report and the Altus report that has been sent to all the councillors. I do not believe it is fair process to have inaccurate information sent to council when such an important decision is to be made. I would like to question why these documents are not vetted prior to sending them to council, to councillors. It is now up to us as residents to trawl through the 112 pages and then point them out to each of you. A fight I don't believe that we should have had to have. I would also like to quote Councillor Loden from the 20th of June meeting. He said he would like to see greater top floor setbacks that are impacting, oh, that's loud. Okay. He said he would like to see greater top floor setbacks that are impacting particularly the neighbours to the north, which is us. Please note that bedroom 3 is the top floor room on the northern side above the garage, and it has not even been mentioned anywhere in the agenda briefing as far as that's been moved back. That's probably because they have moved it back 1 centimetre. 1 centimetre. So Dan Loden asked, particularly for the neighbours on the north, for it to be set back, and we've got 1 centimetre. This is beyond offensive to us. And Councillor Dan Loden's requests have been completely ignored by the applicant. The owners of 80 Auckland Street have stated before that they have worked hard all their lives and want their dream home. Unfortunately, their perceived dream home comes at the cost of erasing the dreams of us and the other 2 adjoining neighbours. We have also worked hard for this. The lawyer's submission states the percentage of discretion the applicant is asking for.
Can you please start wrapping up
Yes.
your remarks?
This, in anybody's opinion, is far too much, especially when impacting so many others' lives. I do not believe they have abided by what the councillors have asked at the June meeting when their previous plans were deferred, and it is for this reason I ask that this application is refused. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Next speaker. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nicolette Barbas and I'm speaking to you on behalf of my mother Frida and father Con, who are applicants of 80 Auckland Street, North Perth. Mum was born in Greece and came to live in WA with her parents, who bought their first home in the city of Vincent, where she's lived most of her life. Now, Mum and Dad want to build their new home. North Perth and the broader Vincent community mean a great deal to my parents, and they don't want to be anywhere else. This application has taken a huge toll on my parents, and neither of them are in a position to speak to you this evening. The very recent passing of my grandmother has added to the emotional toll of the last year or so. My parents were aware at the early stages that this would be a challenging site. However, the professional advice they received suggested that everything was doable in a flexible planning system that can accommodate site constraints, such as an irregular lot shape, steep topography, and a sewer easement. Everyone keeps telling us that planning is not just about the enforcement of rules, but rather that every application should be treated on its merits. Since this application was lodged, my parents have done nothing other than make continual changes to the design to appease the concerns of others because of this challenging site. After you deferred your decision back in June, Mum and Dad sought the services of Mr. Algieri from Altus Planning, who has considerable experience with these types of applications. And it's for that reason that we've let Mr. Algieri speak to you in respect to the technical elements. He advised us that the application should have been approved in accordance with the officer recommendation back in June. Since then, my parents have made further changes to the design in response to additional comments made. To us, it seems that no matter what we do, some of our neighbours will request a complete redesign of the home, or perhaps they want nothing at all because we're not building a house that they want us to. It's almost as if they resent the original property being subdivided, which was approved years ago. For us, it feels like we are pawns in some peculiar game whereby if enough people object to a proposal, irrespective of the challenges of the site, irrespective of the flexibility of planning requirements, and irrespective of the recommendation of the planning officers, then Mum and Dad can be held to ransom. They cannot build their family home they've always wanted in the suburb Mum, Dad, myself, and my brother grew up in. We respectfully plead you to follow the officer recommendation for conditional approval. It's a really challenging site and they've done their absolute best to meet all the planning requirements. Thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, the next speaker, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, elected members. Joe Algieri, 68 Canning Highway, South Perth. I'm the Director of Altus Planning. I'm a planner, not a lawyer, and I'm representing the applicants in item 5.3, 80 Auckland Street. I came to this application afresh back in June after the deferral decision, and the first thing I said to Frida and Con is that you should have come to see me 6 months ago. It's absurd that an application can drag on for what is now a year. It was well over 6 months at that time. I lodged the SAT application, and the great thing about the SAT process is that it encourages the parties to mediate. We spent over 3 hours pulling the application apart and looking at every element of your concern, and we entered that process in good faith. So I don't understand where the disrespect to your previous resolution was. I'm here to urge you to take professional advice. There's an officer recommendation. I'm representing the applicants, but please, I've seen this happen before. You hear me saying one thing, you see others saying something else. And for those of you that are brand new to this, trying to get your head around planning, you say, well, what do we do? Everyone seems to be upset about this. Please do not defer to the tribunal to make a decision because you think, oh, well, this is a bit too hard for us. You still have to defend that refusal. It will cost you a lot of money. It's going to cost probably $25,000 to $30,000 a piece. If you're concerned about precedent, because one of the concerns was about precedent, let me tell you plainly and respectfully, precedent, at least one example, is case law. I did a case like this 4 years ago. It's similar in many respects. 14 Harley Street. It went to a hearing largely based on a lot of the community's concerns. And you just have to go to the SAT decision database to look up O'Brien versus the City of Vincent, WA Sat 99. That decision is online forever. It tests your built form policy. It tests the R codes. That is precedent. So please, if you're concerned and confused about this, if you don't trust the administration, get some further advice, not on whether you can fight it. Any lawyer can write you a letter to say, yeah, you can fight this, but about the merits of the application and if it's worth going down that pathway. I'm assuming if you follow the alternative.
Can you please wrap up your statements?
Read the officer report, because so many elements of this do comply to deem to comply. Visual privacy, overshadowing, and height complies. If height complies, the last thought I will give you is that there's no consideration of loss of views. Please get some advice on planning. I wish you well with your debate and your decision making. Thank you for your time.
Do we have another speaker?
Thank you. Pauline Holdaway. I'm a landowner in Edward Street, Claysbrook. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight on item 5.7. It's disappointing, although in some ways expected, that we have before you the intentions of Wholesome and Handsome requesting yet another extension to their planning approvals to continue to operate in Claysbrook. Non-government entities such as companies like Hanson and Wholesome are not restricted to the requirement to consult community. They don't need to follow due process and report in the same manner that government agencies do. They have the ability to react and take action quickly. They're also not going to risk their income stream, their profits, and the company by not having prepared for a move that has been on the books for over a decade. Both companies will have contingency plans that will come into action the moment they realise that they are not going to get an extension for their planning approval as they're requesting. There is no risk to us as a community and a local government agency in requiring that both companies adhere to the existing planning approval expiration. Should either company have decided to take a risk and not be prepared for the inevitable, which I highly unlikely that they have, there are other major concrete and batching companies that will be more than capable of picking up any reduced production capacity during the relocation period to meet development demands. However, I'm very confident that both Wholesome and Hanson will find a way to up their production in their other plants. I ask that Council be strong on the existing planning approval expirations and hold true to the commitments that has been given to the community by not supporting any further extensions to either batching plant. Both companies still have over 7 months to action their plans. The fact that they have both left it to this late to physically action any relocation plans indicates an arrogance and a disrespect for the community that is living with the side effects of their operations on a day-to-day basis. I appreciate that not supporting an extension for Hanson will put council officers under pressure and basically under pressure to get agreements in place. However, the community and council planning officers also worked under pressure to get the North Claysbrook planning framework in place, agreed to and approved in time. Why now take the pressure off and give them what they've been angling for when they've had over a decade to action this move in a planned and rational way? As a community that will be fighting for no extensions with the final decision makers, we ask that council support us by not supporting any extensions to the planning approvals. Instead, do your best in a situation that's not of your making to assist them where possible, but within the timeframe that they have left, and recognise that Wholesome and Handsome are the people that have really put themselves in this position. Thank you.
Can we have the next speaker, please?
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, CEO and staff. Ross Iopolo from Leederville, resident and ratepayer. I'm talking on item 5.8, proposed major land transaction for the sale of Leederville car parks. And I'm mainly talking to the newly elected councillors. Congratulations to them. This item is a complex land transaction, never undertaken before by the city, and new councillors need to be across this before they vote. I have no problem with the design or qualitative proposal. I think it's going to be a tremendous outcome to the City of Vincent. Where I have issues, which I have, I won't go into the detail, but which I have raised as an ex-councillor here in this chamber, relates to the financial outcomes, the quantitative outcomes to the City of Vincent. What I do strongly recommend is that each new councillor watch the recordings from the council briefing and council meeting of 9 and 16 May. The concerns raised by me at those meetings were tabled behind closed doors and therefore not available to the public, but you should be able to access those because the issues and concerns raised in that meeting affect the decision that you're being required to make as newly elected members. I'm not sure if you have actually reviewed those, but what I recommend is that if you haven't had the opportunity, that the course of action that is open to you is raise a motion to defer next week, this decision, until you've had the opportunity to be fully briefed on this item, including the history of this project and the issues raised in the aforementioned meetings. In my opinion, one of the issues was the current process. And I think one option open to all of you is to abandon the current process and the city should move to a request for tender process where council outlines the outcomes it seeks from the learnings it has gleaned from the current process so that proposals can be received in a competitive tender situation where all proposals may be directly compared to each other and you're not trying to compare design build forms that are apples and oranges and be dictated by the financial outcomes proposed by property developers at their vested interest. The current process does not allow for any competitive tension in that you cannot negotiate. You have to take it or leave it on what the financial outcomes that the property developers have proposed. This decision, more than any that you will come in your time as councillors, has generational impact on the City of Vincent and its residents. The decision and culpability are yours and yours individually. And all I am asking is you're fully informed of the decision before you're being asked to vote. Thank you.
Okay, can we have the next speaker, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Dudley Meyer, Highgate. First item is the 5.7, the concrete batching plants, and it's more to do with the move of the depot, not the extension of the plants. First of all, I'd like to say it's not Vincent's responsibility to solve Hanson's problems. Your decisions have to be from the best interests of the ratepayers of Vincent. I find this to be a very poor report. There are very few details, such as who would actually pay for the transfer to the new site in Mount Claremont, or even if Hanson would be buying or leasing the site from the city. I can make a guess, but there's no explicit mention in this report. There's no mention, let alone any quantifiable costs of having the depot an extra 5 kilometres away from the Vincent boundary, not even a ballpark figure. The extra time travel for machines and people isn't a trivial imaginary cost. It's a significant cost borne by Vincent ratepayers in perpetuity. Yet it's not even acknowledged in this report. This seems to be a little more than a thought bubble and a very amateurish one at that. The community has a right to expect a bit more professionalism when proposing something that has potential to significantly impact the costs borne by all ratepayers, particularly when they're going to become hidden costs in the future. I'm not saying don't consider it. It's just do something that's more professional and not the back of the envelope sort of level of presentation. I'd expect a lot more detail in any sort of feasibility study. The next item is 5.8, Leederwood land transaction. It said that the report says that the financial implications are detailed in the business plan. The business plan is pretty rich in pretty pictures and pretty words, but the financial details are fairly scant and not cohesively presented. You have to search around and try and put a picture together. I built a picture of the financial outcome and what I think it might be, but I've got no certainty that it's the correct model at all. This is a business plan. The word business should give you a clue. It should present the business side of the proposal so we can work out if we're getting the best deal or even a good deal. So I have no confidence that this is the best financial outcome for the city that it could have achieved. There's a submission on page 118 and it says, there is insufficient information available to make a judgment call as to whether this is a good long-term financial outcome for the city. And this comment came from someone who's in the industry. So they're actually saying, we can't tell if this is a really good plan. Could you have done better or not? So I urge councillors, make sure you really understand the proposal and don't just tick the box because you have no idea of what's being proposed. And importantly, and this is a very important thing you should consider, if you want to ensure affordable housing or social housing, this is the time to impose it. Once you approve this, it's out of your hands. It's the DAP who will make decisions, not the council. They'll make decisions on planning grounds and what the proponent proposes, not what the council wishes to happen. You can't then go to them and say, oh, you've got to put affordable housing. They'll say, no, the DAP will decide. We'll make some proposals about benefits that will give us the extra height or whatever. So if you want affordable housing or social housing, now is the time to make a decision. Thank you.
Okay, can we have the next speaker, please? Is there anyone further who wishes to speak? Okay. All right. So the items that have been raised, which is 5.1, 5.3, 5.7 and 5.8 will be brought forward on the agenda and will be discussed first. A reminder that no decisions are being made tonight at this briefing. This is for councillors to ask questions to the administration on the items on the agenda, and the decisions are going to be made next week at the meeting. So there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:36. Okay, you got the list? Yes, please. Okay, we have received some statements in writing and questions and statements in writing.
Yes, confirming we've received statements from Catherine Harkin of North Perth, item 5.3, Tristan Marshall, North Perth, 5.3, David Hunter, North Perth, 5.3, Fiona Hunter, North Perth, 5.3. These questions will be addressed ahead of the meeting if they relate to an item that is on the agenda.
CEO, are there any declarations of interest?
Yes, through you, Mayor Zaman, 2 declarations of interest. The first from Councillor Wolf, an impartiality interest in relation to item 5.2, number 12, Brookman Street, Perth. The extent of the interest is that Councillor Wolf has a close friend who lives next door to the proposed development, and the adjoining property is mentioned multiple times in the report. The second declaration is from Councillor Lafontaine, impartiality interest in relation to item 7.4, which is the first quarter budget review. Councillor Lafontaine notes that the interest is that she owns and resides in a property on Forest Street, North Perth, and this is in relation to attachment 4 capital budget, including carry forward, specifically the Black Spot project in relation to Fitzgerald and Forest Street, North Perth. And that's all that I've received tonight. Mayor Zaman.
Councillors, are there any other declarations of interest? Okay. So we note those declarations. Thank you, CEO. So we will discuss the items in the order raised. Okay. Sorry, I'm trying to find. No, so that one. Okay. So now we will deal with item 5.7, concrete batching plants relocation plan. Are there any questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to the Director or CEO. There was a comment from the gallery which was a similar question that I had around what does shortest time possible extension mean? I guess what are the parameters around that? And then separate to that from another person from the public, they asked about if there was no extension at all. Can you just run through, I guess, what would be the implications of that?
Through you, Mayor. In relation to the shortest time possible, that's still something that the batching plants are considering. And we've been discussing with Hanson in particular how long it would take them to, if everything went smoothly, how long it would take them to relocate. So to be honest, it's unknown at this stage. It would be years though. We're talking 2-3 years plus. In relation to Wholesome, I think the question really depends on, well, if an approval was issued, if an extension was issued, and it was tied to how long it would take them to bring their Welshpool plant or expand their Welshpool plant. Again, that's something that is still being worked through, because obviously what happens is they come with a number that's much higher than the lowest absolute time frame, and so we've been going backwards and forwards with them on and questioning whether it could be reduced further. So I don't have an exact answer for you, but it's, you know, in the range of years, not months.
And I guess if the report was amended that we didn't provide any form of extension whatsoever, what would that mean in terms of where the city would go in terms of negotiation / pushing them out?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to consider. First of all, if no extension was granted, the current approvals don't require the decommissioning all those sites to be deconstrained or sold and redeveloped. So we would be in a situation where the plants could potentially stay there as they are, but they wouldn't be operating. So, and there would be the potential that in the future, if there was a change in position by the state government, change in state government, that they could be become operational again. So there's a risk there. There's no requirement for them, as far as we are aware at this point. There's no requirement for them to remove the structures or deconstrain the sites. They would just have to stop operating. The trucks will stop coming in and out, and that would obviously be beneficial. But there are risks associated with that too.
Okay, do any councillors have any further questions in relation to this item? Councillor Warner.
Thank you. Just a question from the gallery was about the hidden costs with relocating our depot to the Netherlands, Mount Claremont area. Does admin have any comment on that?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, we've had preliminary discussions with Hanson, and the preliminary discussions were that Hanson would meet the city's relocation costs. And the site is, our current depot site is on Osborne Park in the city of Stirling, which is closer to the north of the city of Vincent, and the Mount Claremont site is immediately adjoining the Western Metropolitan Regional Council site, where the city's one and only rubbish collection goes to, which is our FOGO current receival point, gets transferred to the WMRC. So there's logistical and operational benefits of being co-located with WMRC, where our rubbish trucks have to deliver our rubbish bins to every day, as opposed to where they're currently coming and going from in Osborne Park. There could be depending on where you draw the boundaries between the depot and which bit of the city of Vincent you're trying to get to, yes, it is slightly longer, 2-3 kilometres, depending on which way you draw the boundary around that. But it's not insurmountable from our perspective in terms of the overall benefits for what would be an upgraded site.
Thank you for that. And just one other question, and I'm sorry if I've missed it through everything, but they've applied to the state government for an extension. When are we expected to get an answer on that?
There is no time frame for the minister to determine the application that they've made, and so we don't know. But I'd say that it will be in the next few weeks that we'll hear the answer to whether the application has been accepted.
Okay, are there any further questions from councillors in relation to this item? Okay, well then we'll move on to the next item. So that is 5.3? Yes. Okay, so now we move on to item 5.3. So are there any questions from any councillors pertaining to this item? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor Zamon. I just wanted to pick up, please, on one of the comments that one of our community members raised tonight. And he pointed to an issue raised in one of the written statements around the accuracy of the applicant's streetscape elevation diagram. And there was a suggestion that that diagram is inaccurate because it's not to scale. The written statement asserts that that diagram has been widely circulated to a variety of stakeholders, and that there have been decisions made on the basis of that diagram in relation to bulk and scale, character and context, and aesthetics. So I was wondering from the administration if there was any view that they could clarify around the accuracy of that diagram, please. Thank you.
Through Mayor Zamon, when the applicant submitted a package of supporting information accompanying their amended plans, which stemmed from the SAT mediation process, it included a streetscape perspective that effectively pieced together the subject site and what the development that they were proposing would look like in the context of the adjoining property, particularly 78 Auckland Street, which is just to the south. That plan was not to scale. This was brought to the attention of administration when we had published this for community consultation purposes. I think it was on the first day, a number of residents raised this with the city. We reached out to the applicant to obtain an updated streetscape elevation. That was done, I think, on the second day of consultation. That was then uploaded on the city's website as publicly available, and those residents were notified of that change. When you look at the briefing agenda before you, the applicant's supporting report still contains the erroneous streetscape elevation. However, the city has included as attachment 5 the to scale streetscape elevation that truly represents how this would sit between 31 Gill Street, the approved development, as well as 78 Auckland Street. That material was circulated subsequently to the city's design review panel when we obtained feedback on the proposal, and that's reflected in the officer report as well. And that's the assessment that was reflected in administration considering the application.
Councillor Wolf. Many thank yous for that. If I could just add one follow-up question on this item. The same written statement raises some concern around the commentary in the papers around the Auckland Street character retention area. And I note that the commentary sort of says that this is not a due regard matter for the purposes of the application in front of us. But as a new councillor, and perhaps for some of the other new councillors, it would be good just to have some contextual background information, a little bit around sort of the status and the process of that, and why that's not a relevant matter in terms of the one we're looking at today. Thank you.
Through Mayor Zamon, there's commentary in the officer report under the legal policy header, which stepped through relevant legislation, regulations and policy, and includes some background around the city having received that nomination for Auckland Street between Gill Street and Hobart Street. And that this is being progressed by the city currently. It does capture in the officer commentary that it is not a due regard matter, and that's really planning speak, because from a planning perspective, a decision maker is required to have due regard for a number of matters, and this particular nomination has not yet reached a critical point or a milestone point of having received endorsement by council and subsequently being advertised and gone through that process to be what we call in, again, planning speak, seriously entertained. So it's neither certain nor imminent. So that's the reason why it's hasn't been given due regard in the officer's assessment of the application, but absolutely can confirm have received a nomination. Of the 39 properties between Gill Street and Hobart Street, I believe it's 26 landowners had supported the nomination, so met the threshold, exceeded the threshold, and we've got 66% support for pursuing that nomination.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Okay, are there any further questions from councillors?
Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Zemon. I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question about the erroneous streetscape elevation. Was it provided to the city originally with the notation that it was drawn to scale, or was it noted as not to scale?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, it is annotated as being true to scale.
Did the applicant provide any justification why that erroneous drawing was provided?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, we did not seek clarification. Ultimately, the applicant provided that that information, and it was identified that there was some errors in that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions from councillors in relation to this item? Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the some of the changes that the applicant made, there was reference to the north setback only being changed 1 centimetre. Could you just provide some commentary on admin's assessment of that acceptability in responding to the deferral?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, there are changes made through the amended plans. The city's officers have tried to capture those. Ultimately, importantly, some of those changes are more substantial than others. Some are more minor. So, for example, in the officer report, we've tried to capture that in respect to the ground floor setbacks, that it has been increased between 4 and 8 centimetres. So we've tried to capture those changes accurately, but equally there are more substantial changes in terms of the alfresco roof form and the setbacks associated with that. So I take the feedback that for the upper floor setbacks, the city's officers have not gone through every dwelling portion or room fronting on Auckland Street and captured whether that has increased by a substantial or a more minor amount. So we didn't capture that some rooms had been adjusted in the order of 1 centimetre, but we did capture that some of those rooms had been increased, including the upper floor balcony, which is now consistent with the deemed compliance standard. So we've tried to accurately capture the changes. There is an opportunity, however, to perhaps improve the level of accuracy there.
Are there any further questions from councillors? Councillor Alexander.
Well, thanks very much. I know you're saying that new councillors are having some difficulty with this. Well, I think there's a lot of us are having difficulty with this because we're putting the decision aside to go a completely new direction. And we've been provided with lots of information that we're expected to try and weigh up and in what's caused that change of direction. So I just wonder if administration can give us 2 or 3 minutes of what really influenced them, what particular parts in these many, many changes that are there, some minor up to 1 centimetre. If you can just, you're recommending to us a 180-degree change. Can you just give us a bit of a taste of why?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, my advice to council is there's 2 critical aspects that you need to satisfy yourself of. Number 1, that the extent of the changes made following your deferral decision meets those concerns that you had raised previously. And number 2, overall that development, whether that meets the planning framework. Okay, so those are the 2 key considerations here. For administration, we previously recommended approval of the previous scheme. Okay, so that doesn't change. In terms of the changes that have been made, they would improve the development outcome in administration's view. So on that basis, administration is still maintaining a recommendation of approval. Now, that is a differing view that council had, because ultimately council previously sought additional changes to be made. They were not satisfied and resolved to defer the application. So it's difficult for me to say that the extent of the changes would satisfy yourself. That is a question that only you can respond to. For administration, we've tried to capture those changes, albeit perhaps we can flesh those out a little bit more, but we've attempted to try to capture those changes for you to the extent that they have addressed those reasons for deferral. Now, those changes have improved the development outcome, but ultimately you need to form a view whether you are satisfied that it achieves, those reasons for deferral, which is, as you heard from the residents this evening, around greater stepping back of the development horizontally across the development, as well as the upper floors vertically being set back, and also resulting in a greater transition to the southern adjoining property.
Are there any further questions? Are there any further questions from councillors in relation to this item? Councillor Warner.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. Just to clarify something really quite, I think, black and white here. One of the comments I keep hearing is about the obscuring of the views from the house on Gill Street, that this house potentially at 80 Auckland Street would obstruct. But as Joe Algieri said, if the height complies, the argument for the loss of views is sort of irrelevant. So really, I want to know, does the height comply here?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, yes, the building height complies with the deemed to comply standard.
Okay, are there any further questions from councillors? Okay, we'll move on to the next item, noting that we're going to be making a decision about this at the next meeting. So the next item will be is 5.1. Number 46B, Lot 1, Plan 417-673 Joel Terrace. Okay, so do any councillors have any questions in relation to this item? Okay, we can move on then. So the next item is item 5.8, outcome of public notice, proposed major land transaction, Leaderville. Okay, so do any councillors have any questions pertaining to this matter? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. In a submission from Leaderville Connect, in response to the consultation, there was a comment around that they believe that now is the time for the city to actively seek the gazettal of Frame Court through to Newcastle Street as a formal public road. Can you just comment on what that process would entail and where would that fit, if at all?
Through your Mayor Zaman, that land, the section of Frame Court, basically from where our car park entry is, all the way through to Newcastle Street, is owned by the Water Corporation. So the city doesn't really have any way of gazetting that as a public road without the Water Corp's support. So I understand the Water Corp is supportive of that happening at the right time being when their site is redeveloped. So I don't think there is an opportunity for that to happen at this point.
Are there any further questions from councillors about this particular item? Okay, noting that we had a full briefing on this matter earlier. Okay, so I will now move through the agenda. Okay, just okay, councillors, we'll move to item 5.2, number 12, lots 69 and 80, plan 4576 Brookman Street, Perth. Are there any questions, noting that there has been one declaration of interest? Are there any questions in relation to this matter? Okay, moving through. Moving on to 5.4, Green Track Incentives for Environmentally Sustainable Designed Developments. Are there any questions? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate there might not be a straightforward answer to this question. I'll just say that up front. But I was hoping to get a sense of the queue, the length of the queue that would be skipped by those applications in the priority assessment stream. So I was wondering if there were any sort of estimated or indicative sort of average timeframes that we might be able to refer to in terms of the difference between those with and without an LCA. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, I can give you some more detailed information in the briefing notes, but just generally speaking, we're assessing DAs between ideally 21 days to 30 days at the moment. Under the priority assessment stream, we would look to assess them within 5 business days. That's the indicative target that we've provided and the target we'd like to set ourselves. So that's at the first point of assessment. Then each time an applicant submits amended plans, we would apply that same target. So at the moment, say if we received amended plans back, it might take the officer about 14 days to have a look at the plans, reassess them, and decide how to proceed. We would look at setting again 5 business days for that turnaround, but I can break that down for you a bit in the briefing notes.
Thank you so much. That'd be great.
Are there any further questions in relation to this matter from councillors? Okay, I'll move on to the next item. So that is that one. So item 5.5, outcome of advertising of amendments to local planning policy number 7.522, consulting rooms. Are there any questions pertaining to this matter? Okay, I'll move on. So item 5.6, Public Health Plan 2020 to 2025, Annual Review number 3. Are there any questions pertaining to this matter? Councillor Warner.
I just noticed that everything seems to be on track, which is great. Well done. Except for one item, which, so to me that stood out. Do you have an ETA from when that should be commenced?
I think it might be in the report through you, Mayor Zaman, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Yeah. I can't remember, so I'll put it in the briefing notes. My apologies.
Are there any further questions from councillors in relation to this matter? Okay, moving through. We now come to item 6.1, advertising of amended policy street trees. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in relation to the objective, it currently refers to the care, control and management of trees in thoroughfares. Does the administration have an opinion on whether that objective could also include reference to increasing the quantity of trees in thoroughfares?
Through the chair, it's yes, the objective looks at maximising tree canopy through that public space. So we could consider altering the purpose to reflect that.
That would be great.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. I guess along similar lines to that, I guess I live in Perth on Grant Street. It's an extremely narrow road reserve. I guess there's examples around the precinct of street tree plantings within the road itself. I was wondering if, I guess, the policy could be updated to offer guidance around where in-road planting could be included, where verge plantings aren't possible, and some guidance on that. Apologies for not bringing this up in the workshop on the item when it first came.
Thank you. Through the chair. We can look at that in the supporting guidelines. I think the principle of trying to increase canopy in thoroughfares would carry through, and that would look at smart ways of trying to increase canopy through the actual carriageway itself, whether it's through nibs and tree planting points in those circumstances. So it would be something that I think we could
comfortably carry through in the guidelines with scenarios where that might be able to be achieved.
Okay, thank you. Just on item 5 in the policy around street tree protection, I was wondering if it'd be worthwhile to refer to the Australian standard around tree protection in this this item. I guess like we offer a little bit of guidance. Some of the items seem to go beyond what the standard recommends, and others kind of come in a little bit short. I guess like specifically storage of materials and debris within the street tree canopy isn't necessarily consistent with the Australian standard, and a few other items like that.
Thank you, Councillor, and through the chair. I'm not across the Australian standards. We'll have a review of it and we'll make our comments in the briefing notes in response.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Wu.
Thank you, Mayor. I met with a local resident recently who was an environmental scientist a couple of weeks ago, and she spoke to me really, really passionately about the usefulness across a range of fronts of local native trees as opposed to native trees across Australia more generally. So in the context of that discussion, I had a question about one, street tree planting, subclause 5. The second dot point speaks about the preference of Australian native species to achieve our 75% annual target. I obviously wasn't at the workshop, but I wonder if there was any consideration at that time of considering local native species local to the specific landscape and soil type as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'll throw to our manager of parks, Sarah Hill, who is on screen, who will no doubt talk about endeavouring to plant native species that are endemic to the area, but she'll be able to cover off the technical horticultural side of things.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Zamon. In terms of local native species, we do always consider those for certain locations. However, there is a bit of a supply issue, as well as, I guess, the growing characteristics of local native species. We find them quite suited to our parks environment because they tend to be multi-stem, but not so much for streetscapes and other specific locations, which is why in the policy we've tried to, I guess, touch on the right tree for the right spot rather than being too prescribed to a certain species.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions from councillors in relation to this item? Okay, thank you. We will move on. So the next item is 6.2 RFT IE 233-222 Litter Stadium Change Room Redevelopment. Are there any questions from any councillors pertaining to this item?
I have one.
Councillor Wallace.
Sorry, Mayor Zamon. Thank you, Mayor Zamon. It may relate to the confidential items, so yeah, it does in fact relate to the confidential items, so it might wait to the end.
Okay, note that. Thank you very much. Okay, so are there any questions pertaining to this item that are not subject to the confidential items? Okay, well, we'll move on to the next item, which is item 6.3 RFT IE 254-223 at indoor pool change room renewals at Betty Park Leisure Centre. Are there any questions? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just it was in relation to the, I think it was the third part of the motion in relation to the reallocation of funds from the 24-25 budget. And just wondering, is that because the original estimate for the works was significantly less than what was proposed in the submissions?
Through the chair, hopefully our manager, City Buildings and Asset Management is online, Jade Robbins. You might be able to answer that specific question. Thank you.
You're currently on mute. Sorry, just wait.
Through you, Mayor Zamon, the additional funding requested in
point 3 of the recommendation is allocated in the 4-year capital works program in year 2 as 550,000 to fund this project. The reason it was split was we knew that we would tender late in the year. So it was staged over 2 years, 2 financial years. We were actually requesting 650 to be allocated to the project in year 2. And that is because the tenders have come in at the 1.1 million, but we're allowing for 100,000 contingency for the project in year 2.
Great, thank you.
Are there any further questions from councillors pertaining to this item? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So the next item is financial statements as at 30th September 2023. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to ask about a couple of the cancelled projects in the capital works schedule. The solar installation for Belgravia, which has been cancelled, says due to a contract ending, and the replacement of electrical distribution boards post asbestos removal. And it's fine in the briefing notes.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, we'll respond in the briefing notes on that.
Councillors, are there any further questions pertaining to this item? Okay, well then we'll move on to the next item. The next item is 7.2, authorisation of expenditure for the period 1st of September 2023 to 30th September 2023. Are there any questions from councillors? Okay, moving on to the next item. 7.3, investment report as at 30th September 2023. Are there any questions? Okay, moving through. 7.4, first quarter budget review 2023-2024, noting that there has been a conflict declared. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. In the capital budget, there's a reallocation of 100 grand from the enterprise applications upgrades to operational. Can you provide some commentary on that?
Through Mayor Zeman, the reallocation is for works that is more operational in nature. They are not capitalizing to improve the asset. It's more on consultations, which is why we had to move that to operational.
Are there any further questions? Okay, we're moving on to the next item. So that next one will be the council briefing and ordinary meeting of council dates for 2024. They've been circulated. Are there any questions in relation to that? Councillor Hallett.
Sorry, just wondering, what was the reason for moving the AGM back to 7 p.m. and council meetings to 6:30?
Through you, Mayor Zaman, first of all, on the AGM, what we were intending to do for next year is to have a community information session prior to the actual formal AGM. This would be discussed with council, but now's a good time to flag it because we've put together a later start time. We're thinking, for instance, a community barbecue for an hour beforehand for members of the community who are attending the AGM to come meet with all the different teams and talk about their particular areas prior to the formal AGM. And that would provide an hour for us to go through some of their proposed motions and help to put them into potentially the wording and the format and to be able to distribute those in paper for the council members just to facilitate a smoother running of the AGM. There pros and cons for the meeting start time, but we have suggested moving it back to 6:30 for our council meeting times. We have found previously that sometimes 6 o'clock can be a rush for staff and some councillors who are trying to get young kids to bed or finish homework or the like. And we think that 6:30 might be a more family-friendly start time.
Are there any further questions in relation to this matter? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the Glasses on. Okay, the next item is 8.2, appointment of council member and community representatives to the City of Vincent Audit Committee. Are there any questions relating to this matter? Okay, well, moving on. Okay. All right. So it's been suggested that we might get an indication of who might be interested in joining any of these committees. We've, of course, had some discussions about this prior. So do we have an indication from the floor of anyone who might be interested in joining the Audit Committee? Councillor Alexander's indicated an interest. Councillor Hallett's indicated an interest. I also am indicating that I have an interest as well. I believe that Councillor Castle has previously indicated that she has an interest as well. Okay. All right. So then we move on to 8.3, appointment of council members to the CEO Performance Review Panel. Are there any questions pertaining to this item first? Okay, is there anyone that is indicating that they have an interest in being on this particular panel? So Councillor Alexander is indicating that he's interested in being on that. So has Councillor Hallett. I've also indicated that I will be chairing that, or I will be putting my hand up for that. And I think I'm sorry. Yes, that's right. And Councillor Castle is also wanting to be on that particular one. Is there anyone else who's interested in being on that? Okay. So then we have 8.4, the appointment of council members and community representatives to the Arts Advisory Group. Firstly, do we have anyone who has any questions in relation to this item? Can I get an indication of which councillors might be interested in being on this? Councillor Warner and Councillor Greer have both indicated that they're interested in being on this particular committee. Is anyone else? Okay. Councillor Wallace has an interest as well. Okay. Okay, so then we've got the appointment of the council members to the Metro Inner North Joint Development Assessment Panel. Are there any questions in relation to this? So I just want to confirm that the vacancies arise when the vacancies arise for those particular roles, because we've got people in them at the moment. That is the next calendar year. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct. The vacancies would arise from the 27th of January. So the current members would continue until then, and then the new members would be onboarded ahead of that date.
Okay. So can I have an indication of, firstly, are there any further questions in relation to this matter? Councillor Hallett.
I mean, it's a slight blow, but it's in relation to JDAPS and the department offering training for new members, which is a bit of an issue at the moment. And just wondering, to put it as a question, whether this has been raised or escalated to the minister or someone else.
Through you, Mayor Zaman, it certainly has been raised with the department. We're in an ongoing email exchange around that issue at the moment, because Councillor Castle's training hasn't occurred. There was an opportunity presented, but she was only granted a short period of time to accept, and I couldn't make that training. So we're still trying to convince the department that they should arrange for training sooner rather than later, so that we can have everyone ready to go and have enough panel members. So we're awaiting a response to our most recent email from late last week, I think.
So are there any further questions in relation to this matter? Can I get an indication of anyone who might be interested in either continuing on in the role or who's interested in putting their hand up post? So we've got Councillor Hallett, and we've got Councillor Wolf, and we've got Councillor Wallace, and I understand that Councillor Castle has also indicated that she would be interested in taking on the role moving forward. Is there anyone else who's interested in taking on that role? Okay. Right, we'll move on to the next item, which is appointment of the elected member to the Metropolitan Regional Roads Subgroup Central. Firstly, are there any questions about this particular matter? Is there anyone who is is interested in potentially going on this particular committee? So Councillor Wallace is indicating an interest. Councillor Hallett, did you also indicate an interest? Was that a no or a yes? So Councillor Wallace has indicated that an interest, a passionate desire, I think, extremely. Okay. Are there any other questions in relation to this matter? Okay, moving on to the next one, which was item 8.7, Policy Document Register and Review Plan, Progress Update and Implementation Review 2023. Are there any questions pertaining to this item? Okay, we'll just move on. 8.8, Report and Minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on the 18th of October 2023. Any questions? Okay, moving on. 8.9, the Information Bulletin. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Under the Register of State Administrative Tribunal Appeals, there's a reference to the Angove Street Service Station having a directions hearing on Friday last week to determine a new date for mediation. It's just possible to get an update on what that's set for, and also the status of the revised application for this lot.
Through you, Mayor Zaman. Yes, we'll provide that in the briefing notes in writing.
Are there any further questions? Okay, so now we'll move on to the next item. There's motions of which previous notice have been given. There are none. Representation on committees and public bodies. Yeah, that's it. That's what I thought. Okay, so all right. So now we'll move to the confidential items. So the first question I want to confirm is that it was indicated earlier that people do have questions in relation to this item. So in that case, we will move behind closed doors. So at this point, the live stream will be turned off, and I want to thank the public and the live stream viewers who have been in attendance. Thank you very much for your attention, and hopefully you'll tune in for